Hello, hello. This is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about NBC different hosts having a meltdown over Ronna McDaniel being hired by them. We were going to touch on it yesterday, but we ran out of time. But interesting development. Puck News I just saw was reporting a scoop that NBC is already going to not hire her, and McDaniel is seeking some legal representation. There was outrage from Rachel Maddow and Chuck Todd and the Morning Joe. And it's so interesting how upset these people are. Like, people on the right already kind of see it, don't like Ronna anyway, because there was a big failure within the RNC and much of their blame is placed on her. And seeing her go to MSNBC, that's like confirmation bias to them. And they're like automatically like, oh, I knew she was evil the whole time and undermining Republicans, etc. So they're already not, cool about it anyway. But the host on MSNBC, like outspokenly being upset at their bosses over this, is just like some crazy righteous indignation, because they promoted garbage on their stations all the time. Like, they're upset because of the big lie and election denial, but these people pushed Russia collusion and all that stuff for years. And Trump, pushing the idea, which I'm not convinced that he doesn't believe that he didn't fairly win, that he didn't. I'm not convinced that he believes that he lost the election. I believe, there's people around him who told him information that essentially he did, but that doesn't mean that he like processed that, accepted that within his heart, whatever. But as far as like them being upset about that narrative, they made the American people believe that we had a Russian installed puppet in the office. Like, these people are terrible. These people are terrible. So, and they're not objective, and they have issues, they have problems, and so we'll get into that. Also, crazy news. I woke up to the news about the bridge in Baltimore collapsing. Well, not just collapsing. There was a cargo ship that plowed into a beam that caused the whole thing to come down. So that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I'll show you guys the video. But it's really scary to think of something like that happening. And from what I know as of now, that's not like terrorism or anything involved, but but it just seems like there's a lot of malfunctions and malfeasance or whatever, and they'll investigate and so on. But it's just a really crazy tragedy. Also, P. Diddy was his homes were raided the other day. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. But the main story is going to be this Ronna thing. But before we jump into it, I encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate, because it does cost a stream and run my website, all that stuff, so you guys can support. I appreciate it. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can send super chats. You guys can check out different merch that we have available at blacktnews.com. Like this, make crack whack again, Trump 2024 shirt. I know I kind of laughed when I said that, but make crack whack again. And by the way, this was not even about Hunter Biden at the time when I made this shirt. It was about like the report about the crack pipes that the Biden administration was like passing out to people. But We got other merch and stuff you guys can check out and support as well. And I guess we'll go right into it from there. But I do want to give an update about the CNN story. I sent my answers to the journalist at CNN today, well, this early this morning. So I'm assuming the article will probably be out maybe sometime this weekend because they wanted to have it for Easter. And so I gave lengthy answers and good answers to the questions they asked. They were lengthy, so I don't know what will get in the what will be in the article, what will not be in the article. But taking a chance there. If I'm misrepresented or whatever, I guess I'll have the questions and the things that I said, and you guys will all know about it, and we'll all talk about it together. But I don't know. It might, it seems kind of like I appreciate him contacting me to ask clarifying questions as opposed to, I guess, just taking things that maybe he didn't understand about my article and just interpreting it whatever kind of way. So I appreciate it. So we'll see what happens. And again, I'm grateful for the exposure. Kit Kat says she's cautiously optimistic about the CNN thing. Hopefully it leads to like more eyes on the actual article that I wrote and the answers that I gave. Hopefully it will lead to I don't know, more people coming to Christ and or just, some kind of better self-revelation or something. For example, let me just read one of my answers. Like he asks, you say that racism is evil and it doesn't mean we ignore injustice, but if I'm reading you correctly, you suggest an obsession with the color of Jesus creates the same sort of ethnic racial divides that we should be fighting against. Can you elaborate on this, please? I think it's a good point because it shows that you do care about racial issues. And so my answer was this: the Bible teaches us that we are all made in the image of God. And this is Genesis 1:27. Oh, first chapter, 27th verse. We all fall short and sin, Romans 3:23, and that Jesus died to redeem us all. Whosoever believes in him shall receive everlasting life, John 3:16. Heaven isn't exclusive for rich or the fair skin. God's arms are outstretched to all. And as followers of Christ, we are called to love our neighbors as ourselves, Mark 12:30-31. To hate and reject an image bearer of God based on skin color is evil. Overall, I don't believe discussing or talking about the color of Jesus is a bad thing. Jesus is a historical figure, and he obviously had skin. His ethnicity and lineage were also important, and the gospel, according to Matthew, starts by laying it out. The error people find themselves in is when they try to impose their trauma, hate, or ideologies onto Jesus and warp who he is for self-validation. That self is supposed to die and be born again. Find validation in who he called you to be, not how the world tries to define you. So I hope that I don't know how many words he has or how many people he's interviewing, but I hope at least that last line gets in there because there's a lot of people who are weighed down by different expectations and negativity of the world, and they just let that warp them into a way that God didn't intend them to be. So anyway, I'm excited. You guys are excited. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And one thing I also want to note before we thank you, Kit Kat. Beautifully put. Thank you very much. Before I jump into the Ronna drama, I was I was listening last night. I was one of the participants in the live. I mentioned this on YouTube. Lauren Chen hosted a stream about Christ is King because people have been saying that lately. There's a video of Andrew Clavin talking about Candace being pushed out from Daily Wire, and a lot of people have taken his video and are like, the Daily Wire saying Christ is King is anti-Semitic. And it's kind of more complicated than that. Like, actually, someone I know sent me a video today, like, Daily Wire saying that Christ is King is anti-Semitic. And I'm like, no, not exactly. The reason why, and I explained that originated, or what they're talking about, is that Candace Owens, when she had her beef with Ben, the first time she tweeted Christ is King on Twitter was when she was coming at Ben and said the Bible's not about you. And then she, in her thread, she said Christ is King. So she used it in a thread where she was telling off Ben Shapiro. And then all these people were just like, oh, based. And they had all these memes and gifs with, Ben, and were mocking him and so on. And Lauren Chin actually like retweeted her saying Christ is King, was like, you go girl. So I assume she's got to know the original context of this sort of drama that's popping off. So they are supposed to talk about that. I know apologists like Inspiring Philosophy was in the live for a while, waiting to speak, trying to speak, to talk about scripture and things like that, but he was never called on. And for, I guess, a long time that he was in there, they were talking about mostly about Daily Wire drama, because Jeremy Boring jumped in it. And so people were asking him questions about, is he America first, and would he hire someone who's very conservative, but they're anti-Israel, and how they're kind of trying to ask the question. He's like, are you trying to ask me why Candace Owens was fired? So I guess, I mean, she was fired. He wouldn't elaborate as to the reasons why, but I thought that was interesting, because I did kind of start to wonder. I'm like, well, was her contract up? Did they just agree to part ways? I mean, there's all this drama surrounding her. So but according to him last night, the context we got is that she was fired. So Nick Fuentes was in there as well, and he said something along the lines of, and I can maybe pull this, I'm not going to find the clip while I'm live with you guys. I'll maybe do a follow-up video later, but if so, you won't, essentially, it was something along the lines of, you won't have someone who speaks out against Israel, but you have Ben Shapiro to be the face of the Daily Wire, and he won't even say Christ is King. And Ben is Jewish, so why would he say that? That doesn't mean that Ben doesn't promote Judeo-Christian values and morals and ethics and all sorts of different things. And he's still Jeremy's best friend. So the sort of mentality that these folks are pushing is just kind of bizarre. And like Inspiring Philosophy, he wrote a post saying, like, if Christ is king, act like Christ is king. Like, it's not about trying to amass earthly power. It's about preaching the gospel and serving others. So the people, we're not fighting like fleshly foes, we're fighting like spiritual battles and other things like that. And I've written an article about it. I haven't published it yet, but about this whole ordeal. And like, you can, just because you boast and proclaim things about God, doesn't mean that your heart is right. And it doesn't mean that at the end of the day, Jesus will say, yeah, we're all good. He might say, I never knew you, depart from me. So the question is, where's your heart? So of course Christ is king. Of course, every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess, which is what Andrew Clavin said as well. But I also know that people used it as a dig at Ben. Like, I can't ignore that. That's just the context. So of course Christians are like, yeah, Jesus is king. But if you're using it to bring someone down, to kind of, I don't know, make them bend the knee or tease them or something, is that right? Is that right? So it was wild. Someone didn't like that I said it was interesting dot dot dot. I meant interesting in a bad way, a hot mess sort of way. Anyway, I did look at Andrew Clavin's whole entire video about it. I mean, he said some things that were kind of interesting theologically that I disagreed with, but I think he did like a follow-up video explaining his theology. So I'll have to look into that before I comment further on it. But the way that some people are talking about the situation just isn't accurate. And I've been following it a while, chronicling it for a while. So I guess I don't mind kind of, you know, setting things in order. And someone had asked like, why does this matter? Like my bills matter and my safety matters, and why does this drama matter? And if it doesn't matter, you can just kind of scroll past, I guess. But to me it matters because if the right is wacko fractured, that diminishes the persuasion, it diminishes its political power, it diminishes the witness of the gospel. And those aren't good things for the country. Those aren't good things for society as a whole. So I want people to act correctly, especially on the right. Just like we look at the left and we're like, those guys are freaking out of their minds. They're crazy. Hey, you person in the middle, you moderate Democrat, you independent, are you really cool with those folks that are crazy over there? Like they do the same stuff to the folks crazy over on the right. And so if you're like I don't know, one of these boastful, sort of seems like anti-Semitic, but Christ is king kind of folks, you're going to just keep validating these dumb articles about Christian nationalism. And there's a documentary about Christian nationalism, and which I responded to a clip of some of these people who keep talking about Christian nationalism, and it's silly because they don't want to talk about politics and Christianity when it's like in the black churches and other stuff like that. They just have a focus on white evangelicals because they're the ones most likely to vote against their diabolical political plans. So, but they'll group in people who are, really kind of off with basic Christians that are like, you know what, I don't like abortion, and be like those Christian nationalists. So I don't want any validation of this insanity, and I don't want this niche kind of group to keep growing and amassing power. And Candace is kind of speaking their language. And I think it needs to be talked about. I think it needs to be corrected. I do. And I think it's important that people speak out. And if you speak out, she kind of does this thing like, I'm just asking questions, or just turns it into like a kind of sort of a victim narrative, but still not like she's laying down, but she's like fighting back and people are coming against. Like, no, there's some genuine things that you did wrong that need to be discussed, and there's no accountability there. You're just kind of pretending to be ignorant on the matters, but it's important to address. Because even if you guys saw my video when I chronicled the Ben and Candace saga that I posted back in November, you guys remember the video started with, did Ben Shapiro get mad at Candace Owens because she tweeted Christ is king? I started that way because that was the narrative. People were saying that Ben Shapiro was angry because Candace tweeted Christ is king, and that wasn't even how things were laid out. So I explained everything. So, but people want to pretend that folks are just triggered because the Christ is king thing, and not the entirety of the whole narrative and how it all went down. So, um I guess you guys can look for my article, probably maybe do a video after I look up some more of the Clavin stuff. But just so you know, that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And Candace Owens, I don't think she said anything in there last night, but she apparently listened to it and said that she thought Jeremy Boring and Nick Fuentes both spoke very well or something, held their own or did well or something, which I'm like, Nick said some off the wall thing. Anyway, let's get to it. Thank you to everyone in the chat. I see you guys. Thank you very much for again watching live. Let's get to it, this Ronna McDaniel thing. So she got hired by NBC, and people are livid. As I said, Rachel Maddow, Chuck Todd is really ticked off, and you got Morning Joe. So I'm going to play a clip of Morning Joe just flipping out about it. Now, Morning Joe is such a trash show. That has deep Trump derangement syndrome. Maybe they never got over the fact that they had Trump on and were just kind of lavishing him with praise, and Mika just loved him. They just loved him until he was the actual, president or maybe even the nominee, because he wasn't supposed to win, guys. He was just supposed to, I don't know, get ratings or something, but he wasn't supposed to win. How dare he do that? But here's their outrage here with the hiring of Ronna McDaniel. And again, it appears that they're already backtracking and firing Ronna, but we'll see about that.
Former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel.
Well, she was on Sunday's Meet the Press. It was her first appearance since NBC News hired her as a political analyst. I know you won't be surprised to know that we've been inundated with calls this weekend, as have most people connected with this network, about NBC's decision to hire her. We learned about the hiring when we read about it in the press on Friday. We weren't asked our opinion of the hiring, but if we were, we would have strongly objected to it for several reasons, including, but not limited to, as lawyers might say, Ms. McDaniel's role in Donald Trump's fake elector scheme, and her pressuring election officials to not certify election results while Donald Trump was on the phone.
To be clear, we believe NBC News should seek out conservative Republican voices to provide balance in their election coverage. But it should be conservative Republicans, not a person who used her position of power to be an anti-democracy election denier. And we hope NBC will reconsider its decision. It goes without saying that she will not be a guest on Morning Joe in her capacity as a paid contributor. Here's why.
So before we get to the rest of the video, again, I want to point out that the mainstream media, they've like rearranged or blotted out in their memories or a capability of I don't know, any sort of definition of an election denial that has anything to do with anyone else outside of Trump. So, for example, this wasn't NBC. It was like a CNN article. In 2022, they were listing, here's all the people who are election deniers running in all these different states. But they only had people who believed in the big lie of Donald Trump winning the 2020 election. They did not have anyone who believed that Trump wasn't legitimately elected, or they didn't have people who didn't believe that Bush was legitimately elected or whatever. But I guess people think that the Bush one is more controversial, but there's people who didn't believe that Trump was legitimately elected. There are people who pushed the Russia interference stuff, like folks on MSNBC and all these networks, NBC, etc. And they ran with that for the longest time. Again, they undermined the integrity of the election process in the US. They undermined the office of president and made it seem like Vladimir Putin installed our president. And they don't care about the kind of damage that occurred because of that. They don't care. They can't see themselves. That's the issue with this whole Ronna story. That's the issue. Now, her being a contributor to NBC to talk about election stuff, she's been the chair since Trump won in 2016. So she's had a lot of inner workings within the RNC and looking at, things from political landscapes and election night, wins and accept how it all works. She fundraising. She's had issues with collecting some of those wins and stuff, but she's had a lot of experience. So them getting that insight, whether they agree with her commentary or not, she's got things to offer. She does. And they have wackadoodle people on their platform all the time. Joy Reid has a show. Al Sharpton has a show on their network. They have controversial people all the time. They had what's that? Someone called Clarence Thomas. Eric Michael Dyson has said some off the wall racist stuff about Clarence Thomas and other folks time and time again, repeatedly on that show. What about the sort of misinformation? And you could say the lecture stuff is really big. What about the hysteria surrounding Kyle Rittenhouse, for example? And maybe that's not as big as an election, but the country was basically on fire during 2020. And there was such heat surrounding that trial. And this was a young man's life that they wanted to just absolutely destroy. I wrote an article during that time explaining like stuff about the trial. And my dad was out of town. He was out of the country doing mission stuff. And so I sent it to my dad. And so we got off the phone and then he read it and he called back. And I don't think it was in Mexico. I think it was further down south than that at the time. And he was like, that was a really good article. He's like, I didn't know that he didn't kill Black people or something like that. And he's like, it's really scary. He's like, I didn't know a lot of the things that were in the article. And my dad, he like consumes news. Again, he was on the mission field, but the mostly the reason why he didn't know the details was because they skewed all the details in the media. And he said, my dad is not a scary kind of guy. He's not a fearful man, but he said, it's really scary what the media can make you believe. And then we had a conversation with my mom about it. And she's like, I didn't know all that stuff until I heard you guys talking about it either. So, and Joy Reid had so much crazy commentary. It's like, this is why we need systemic racism. Why do we need systemic racism? Because of the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, which I did a video back then at the time. So you guys can go back through my archive. But just crazy commentary, one thing after another from Joy. What about her commentary on like things like critical race theory? And like she had a one of the founders who really like started critical race theory. She's like, I know it's not a Marxist thing. I know it's not a Marxist thing, but can you just like deny it? And she wouldn't deny it because it's not something that you can deny that has Marxist roots. And she would just try to pretend like everyone who said negative things about it were stupid. And then they'd aired stuff that would at the same time confirm what Republicans were saying about it being this ideology with this racial bit, a worldview, and not like accurate history. And that's why people didn't want it in there. And she knows it's not accurate history. That's why she thinks it needs to be taught so people could, I don't know, convict Kyle Rittenhouse. These people are crazy. These people are crazy. So the self-righteousness here with Ronna McDaniel being one of their paid contributors is insane. is insane. What about their COVID coverage? What about their COVID coverage? I might have to show you guys the rest of this video before I can share my screen on this Twitter page. Let me finish this Morning Joe thing, and then I'll show you some, just flashback a little bit of like dudes like Chuck Todd and how emotional and stuff they were.
But to the question, though, do you disagree with Trump saying he's going to free those who've been charged?
I do not think people who committed violent acts on January 6th should be freed.
So you disagree with that? He's been saying that for months. Ronna, why not speak out earlier? Why just speak out about that now?
When you're the RNC chair, you kind of take one for the whole team, right? Now I get to be a little bit more myself, right?
Well, this is what you said a year ago to Chris Wallace. I want to play you what you said.
Are you saying, as the chair of the Republican Party, that you still have questions as to whether or not Joe Biden was the duly elected president?
Joe Biden's the president.
No, I didn't ask you whether he's the president.
No, I don't think that. I think
Do you
there were
think
lots of problems.
he won the election?
I think there were lots of problems with 2020.
Do you think
he won the election.
Pardon?
But ultimately, he won the election. But there were lots of problems with the 2020 election. 100%.
And that's fair.
But I don't think he won it fair. I don't. I'm not going to say that.
So you didn't say he won it fair at that point. Can you say, as you sit here today, did Joe Biden win the election fair and square?
He won. He's the legitimate
Did he win
president.
Fair and square?
Fair and square, he won. It's certified. It's done. But I
Ronna,
do think, Kristen, let me just say something.
To say that. Why has it taken you until now to be able to say
I'm going
that
to push back a little, because I do think it's fair to say there were problems in 2020. And to say that does not mean he's not the legitimate
Ronna,
president.
So, John Meacham.
Exhausting.
Disgusting. It's disgusting. It's so disgusting. She was the RNC chair. You guys play for a team. Come on. Come on. You know you do. You know you do. You people hired Jen Psaki. Jen Psaki has a show. These people pretended last week that President Trump, the former president of the United States, possibly most likely going to be president again, was pushing the idea that he was going to cause like a physical sort of bloodbath if he lost the election, or I don't know, get people to cause some kind of bloodbath or whatever. It was calling for a bloodbath when everybody who has ears and common sense knew he was talking about the auto industry. And Joe Biden had the audacity to cut that in a commercial and to tether it to the very fine people hoax, which these folks also uplifted, to make it seem like, oh, we're just going to have these violent neo-Nazis back in the White House. Do you think that is good for the country? I know this election stuff burns their biscuits. I'm not saying that all the things that they did were good or moral, whatever. I think there was a lot of behaviors that were just, to be frank, detestable after the election. However, you guys are no heroes in this story. Jen Psaki. Joy Reid's probably the worst, but it's probably the worst. Someone in the comments brought up that this is the network that had Eli Mistal. I don't know if you say that's his name, but Ellie Mistal, or I don't know, El Mistal. It's Mistal. And Tiffany Cross. Tiffany Cross says some wild stuff, man. Wild stuff. So I don't know. It looks like Ronna's not gonna be able to keep that job, and I don't know what she's gonna do. Apparently, according to things that I've read, what I've read is breaking. So I don't know, and I just kind of saw it from, it was a news source, but it was one source. So disclaimer, I haven't seen a statement from MSNBC or NBC about her, not being hired. and I assume she wanted that job. Everybody in the know in Michigan knows that Ronna wants to be governor. She wants to be governor of Michigan. I don't know if she still, I don't frankly know why she thought that was going to work anyway. But I don't know if she thinks that's still a possibility, because she has resigned from the RNC. I would say in disgrace is what it looks like, because it's not from a win. You're at odds with the man who's the nominee. So I don't know how you kind of rebuild that profile. I don't know if this gig was supposed to also help her get to that sort of goal, or if this is sort of the new life ambition for her, which isn't, a bad gig, I guess. Again, she'd have a lot to offer as far as commentary in the political sphere, and she's pretty good actually on camera. However, at least for her responses and stuff, but them feigning like, oh, why did she say those things? Because she was the RNC chair. What is she supposed to say? All these Republicans are lying. Like, what? Like, you guys are on a news network. You work with comms and all kinds of different stuff. Like, don't be dense. Like, don't be dense. You hired Jen Psaki, for crying out loud. Tom Elliott has been going in at Chuck Todd and some of these other people, and he posted some stuff from COVID, but that one's kind of long. I don't want to maybe show that one. There was another one that he had that was him just being a bit hysterical about getting vaccinated. I might have to go to his actual feed and find it again. But yeah, Chuck Todd is really upset about this as well. It was Puck News that was reporting that Scoop, Puck News, NBC News plans to drop ex-RNC chair Ronna McDaniel as a paid contributor following an on-air revolt from NBC, MSNBC talent. Execs are deliberating over details, announcement pending. Meanwhile, McDaniel seeking legal representation. So I would assume that's true, because they're flipping out about it. They're flipping out about it. But just take note, if you do happen to watch NBC, take note of the people that they have on there. And every time you see somebody crazy, being like, and y'all was mad about Ronna? So here's a flashback.
Coronavirus news just now from the CDC. Dr. Rochelle Walensky. She's briefing right now as the country once again is moving in the wrong direction on this virus. Walensky says there has been a 10% increase in cases since last week. 10%. 25% of those increased in cases are the Delta variant. She called the Delta variant, quote, hyper-transmissible, and that its spread is being fueled by communities with low vaccination rates. Director Walensky says more than 1,000 counties have a vaccination rate lower than 30%. Folks, nearly 10,000 people died in the month of June. They were needless deaths. Please get vaccinated. If you know someone who's not vaccinated, find a way to convince them to get vaccinated. Literally, the only people dying are the unvaccinated. And for those of you spreading misinformation, shame on you. Shame on you. People are needlessly dying because of your misinformation. Think about it. I don't know how some of you sleep at night who are doing this for a living on television. Coronavirus news.
Shame. 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 The only people dying, huh? The only people dying. I think this is kind of safe to say on YouTube now, but yeah, there were people who died from, I'll still censor myself, but them flipping out to the degree that they did, pushing the idea. Do you guys remember there are people pushing the idea that if you got sick and went to the hospital, but you weren't vaccinated, that they shouldn't treat you? People were flipping insane. and the push to have your kids vaccinated and young people vaccinated and stuff when they were at a considerably less risk. And then you have all these people who are really dying with COVID rather than from COVID, but people want to talk about it. But anyway, did he come off like a professional, unbiased journalist there? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Trying to find another. There was a tweet from Chuck Todd. That was pretty nuts. But something that was interesting, and by the way, people from NBC were telling folks to boycott the interview with Ronna. And apparently they had scheduled that interview prior to her actually being, I guess, offered the job. But I do want to show you guys a clip because there was something interesting in that interview from the other day with Ronna, talking about why she left. So that was one thing I wanted to touch on.
And by former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel in her first interview since stepping down as party chair. In full disclosure to our viewers, this interview was scheduled weeks before it was announced that McDaniel would become a paid NBC News contributor. This will be a news interview, and I was not involved in her hiring. This week, we learned just how much Trump's grip on the Republican Party is impacting the GOP's bottom line. The Biden campaign reported it has more than double the cash on hand of the Trump campaign, while the president himself has sharpened his attacks against his predecessor over his mounting legal debts. As those legal bills are growing, Trump has a new joint fundraising effort with the Republican National Committee that will filter donations to both his campaign and the super PAC paying his legal fees before the RNC even gets a cut. With Trump installing two handpicked loyalists to run the RNC, Michael Whatley and his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, the party is now fully formed in Trump's image.
We are going to determine the fate of not only the United States, but of the entire world. And this body, the RNC, is going to be the vanguard of a movement that will work tirelessly every single day to elect our nominee, Donald J. Trump.
We are going to make sure that every single penny of every dollar raised goes towards one goal, which is winning.
Joining me now is former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, welcome back to Meet the Press. Thank you for being here.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Let's dive right into this and start with your decision to step down as RNC chair. If you can, take me behind the scenes a little bit. Were you pushed out of your role?
Well, there's no question that as RNC chair, you have to remain neutral. And we had a primary process. And so we did have debates, right? We had debates and there was tension and a little friction that started during that process. It was well played out in the media. And I knew at that point when I was doing that role and we were going to have debates that when the nominee came forward and it was likely to be President Trump, that they would want to switch. And that's his right as nominee.
And so were you pushed out by him?
He absolutely wanted me to move aside and wanted Michael Whatley and Laura Trump to come in.
And you say you were neutral. You did put out that statement before he was officially the presumptive nominee, effectively calling on Nikki Haley to step out of the race. Can you say you were really neutral?
I can. I mean, we had a neutral primary. We had debates. I mean, look at the Democrats. They didn't have debates. Now they have RFK Jr. running as a third party. Imagine how the world would be different if they'd have allowed those debates to take place. I think that's so important to our public discourse. So yes, I was neutral, but as I said at that time, there was no math and no path, and that was true. And so we did need to consolidate behind the nominee, and that's what I did.
So I did not think that was appropriate when Ronna said the thing about Nikki Haley at that particular time. Like, you still let things play out or whatever, even though she didn't have a path. I didn't think she had much of a path from Trump anyway. But yeah, I didn't think that was the right move from her. But it is interesting, and I think not good, that Trump obviously didn't want there to be debates. And she's not saying anything new, because it was like very evident through different truth posts, tweets from his followers and people close to him, different emails they'd put out that they did not want there to be debates, from being in the know of like Michigan politics, and just reading. I think one day we went through an article that detailed Trump, his hand in all these different kind of states to leverage his power to make the primaries more favorable to him. So, he orchestrated a process that was very favorable to him. Now, the people, once the indictments and stuff started happening anyway, he was inevitable, I suppose. So you could say, well, all of his maneuvering really didn't matter, but he did try to maneuver a way to just give him the most sort of benefits. And you could say, well, that's how the game is played. When people played games like that in 2015, 16 and stuff, he threw a fit about it, but he didn't want there to really be any sort of competition. I guess ultimately there wasn't, and he didn't entertain a competition. But I think that we deserve to have more spirited debate. I don't know how, because now he's saying, Biden, we get to do a debate. I'm gonna, wipe the floor with him or whatever, etc. I don't see how Joe Biden even entertains having a debate with Trump, knowing that Trump just, refused that process. But I guess at the same time, you could be like, the DNC didn't have any debates at all, so we're like the same. So the DNC was just flat out like, no, Biden's our nominee. Why would we have debates? That's dumb. We're not entertaining anyone else. So, her saying that it was the nominee's right for her to step down, demand that. I don't think that was his right. Since when is that a right? Like, they sort of have that understanding when the election is over and they win. He has a big say in who's going to be the RNC chair, which ultimately the committee, women and men, have to still make that decision. But what the president says has a big bearing on it, that main top of the ticket. But her feeling that she has to step down months before the election is just his right. I don't think that's really the case. You can make the argument that she wasn't raising enough money and there's a lot of losses and there's a lot on the line, so it's important that she steps down. And I don't think Ronna wanted to say, I was kind of abysmal at my job toward the end, so they pushed me out. That I assume that's not the answer that she wanted to give anyway. But it is interesting that there was that tension there between her and Trump. There's so many really, really pro-Trump people that come against Ronna and not against Trump, and just put all their blame kind of on her. But I'm like, Trump has publicly defended her quite a bit, and they've been tied to each other because at the end of the day, Ronna has capitulated a lot to Trump. So that's just the truth. That's just the truth. So I don't know if he probably was mad about the debates. I think that was very interesting insight, but they probably thought a fresh face would be better for fundraising and all sorts of different things to get the RNC back on track, because her face is kind of associated with these multiple losses. So, but again, I don't think Ronna wanted to say that on Meet the Press. By the way, I found this Chuck Todd tweet I wanted to show you guys, because man, he's upset. Like I said, Mattow's upset, but he said the issue isn't about ideology. It's about basic truth. Those trying to make this a left-right issue are being intentionally dishonest. This is about whether honest journalists are supposed to lend their credibility to someone who intentionally tried to ruin ours. So they have, again, people on their platform who don't have credibility. do you guys think Chuck Todd so credible? Like, do you guys think, ooh, Rachel Maddow so credible? And I know their viewers like them or whatever, and I would assume most people think Chuck Todd is more legit than all the other ones, but that doesn't mean he ain't got his moments. But saying it's not a left right issue and then ending it with the lending our credibility to someone who intentionally tried to ruin ours. So it's personal. So it's personal. It sounds really personal. And obviously it's really personal. But NBC, especially MSNBC, are not bastions of reliable information. It's just not. And I would say NBC is the more grown up of the channels. NBC is, is where your cookies go to rant. And, stuff like Meet the Press is more even killed, supposed to be. But y'all supported some trash. And I love this post that's directly under it. Is here are 24 straight minutes of Democrats denying election results. And I don't have 24 minutes to play for you guys this video, but I'm pretty sure I don't have to play it for you because you guys have probably seen compilations like this. And you know that different people push this narrative of our election being stolen. I mean, remember people complaining about the social media impact on Facebook with the Russians and what what Facebook posts, and no one wanted to talk about like Russian posts of things like undermining the effectiveness or safety of fracking because the Russians would prefer if we weren't energy independent. So why would they want us fracking? So they sowed disinformation, misinformation on that front. But no one wanted to be like, oh, the Russians, they don't want us to frack. Maybe we should frack. But they're like, oh, maybe they wanted Trump to be elected. Therefore, they interfered with our election. People had such crazy ideas that they kept pushing. And it wasn't good for our country. So people can be mad about Trump all they want. But at what point are you going to wake up and look yourself in the mirror and admit that you're not good either? You're not good either. You're not the heroes of the story at all, in the least bit. So cry me a river as far as the Ronna thing. But they probably got their way and kicked her out, which is a weak move from NBC to have all of your not all of them, but enough of your on-air talent cry and protest about the RNC chair, who they would have on programs, I assume, like while she was the chair. But they're mad she's getting a check. To make them force her out, it just shows that they have the power, and they should be replaceable. You should just let them whine, let them complain, let them do segments about it. Maybe their audience will hate watch it, and you'll get your clicks and you'll get your views for the little that they are anyway. But to just bend the knee at their whining, I don't think that's a good look for the executives over at NBC anyway. And I don't know if Ronna has any sort of legal standing there, but just babies, absolute babies, absolute babies. Okay, really quickly, which I guess I don't have a ton to say about anyway, but about 1:00 last night, there was a cargo ship that drove into a bridge in Baltimore and just made it totally collapse. So if you haven't seen that footage, it's pretty remarkable. Yeah, so that was wild. And there were cars going across it, and there was like some construction workers. They were able to pull out a few people, maybe like two, but uh last I saw reports on it, they didn't find anyone else. And to be frank, I it would be a great miracle if anyone else was found alive after that. So really insane kind of, I guess not a final destination sort of freak accident, sort of, maybe to a little bit of a degree. They did have a bridge collapse, but that was kind of more random things making the bridge collapse. My sister showed my youngest sister that video, and she was like, "Oh no," because this is like one of her, I guess, really concerns going off across a bridge, and she's like worried about her anxiety and other things like that. So I guess another stuff of nightmare sort of thing to think about when you're traveling. But from people's first thought is, was this terrorism? From the reports that I've seen so far, no, but we'll see. But they did apparently know that they were losing power. They were getting ready for like a 30-day voyage. So not having all their stuff together seems pretty crazy that they have these sort of failures. But CBS said that reported that they tried to warn the Coast Guard. I don't know how much ample time they had, because obviously it wasn't blocked off and people were still crossing.
Following this collision, there were a flurry of law enforcement memos, including one from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, issued to law enforcement and obtained by CBS News. That bulletin saying that the U.S. Coast Guard had reported that the Dolly, the cargo ship, lost propulsion as it was leaving Baltimore Harbor, and that vessel notified the Maryland Department of Transportation that they had lost control of the vessel, and an collision with the bridge was possible. And so we're just learning this new information from law enforcement, from the Department of Homeland Security, that the U.S. Coast Guard had become aware of reports from the Dolly indicating that they had lost propulsion of that motor ship, and that they knew that a potential collision was possible, and that they had notified the Maryland Department of Transportation as much. Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of investigations, because those sort of failures just should not be happening. So I'm sure there's a long list of, if there's not some kind of hacking or something going on, then there's some kind of major breakdown and incompetence somewhere. So I'm assuming there, hopefully, accountability where it needs to be. Some people are probably going to be sued. Maybe people even go to jail. I don't know, but really crazy thing to think about. By the way, Joe Biden said something about, that was the Francis Scott Keys Bridge, and he said some kind of comment about, I think, driving on riding on the train across it, but there's not tracks on that one, so people are like, really? So fine. And something that did happen that was pretty interesting also last night, I'm just going to mention it and let you go. Diddy was raided, P. Diddy, because he's apparently involved with a lot of accusations of sex trafficking. He's been dealing with different suits and allegations from people, and there's allegedly tapes and other stuff like that. But he got raided, his different homes. I think he's still at large, but I assume he's going to be charged. I don't know if you go straight to raid if you're not going to charge folks, but a lot of people are mentioning Cat Williams and some of the stuff that he said, in his interview with on Club Shay Shay, about how everybody's going to be exposed and this is the time. So it was interesting to see, but I'll have to maybe update you more on that tomorrow, because we're we're out of time and I don't want to go crazy over today. But anyway, so, oh wow, someone said that Pete was going to tell us that it was actually a good thing because the bridge was racist. You know, part of me was like, oh, because he was on the way. I'm like, oh, but Pete's actually showing up for his job, is he? But you know, of everybody should get to the bottom of what happened. I did see like somebody say something like, oh, the Republicans, they didn't vote for infrastructure bills and stuff. And people are like, bro, did you see that ship crash into the bridge? What sort of dollars do you think Republicans didn't vote for that would have made the bridge not collapse after that force went into the beam? It went down hard. So anyway, be prayerful when you get in the car, I guess. As my mom always said, before you get into the car, you better pray. You better pray. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate because it does cost a stream and on my website, all that stuff. So you guys can, I appreciate it. Thank you to all of you who watch live, who commented, those of you who watch back later. I appreciate you guys. Check out some of my books. Someone had my sister had tagged me in a video of someone complaining about Book Talk and some of the books that people like on Book Talk that have like a lot of sexual stuff in it, like raw kind of sexual stuff in it. And he's like, why do you guys only like, he wouldn't say, he kept going, but you know what I'm trying to say. I'd assume you know what I'm trying to say. So my sister tagged me because I don't have like sex scenes and stuff in my books. If people do stuff, I fade to black. So I ended up making a video. I haven't posted it yet on my TikTok of going through all my books and explaining how much kissing or whatever is in it. And I know sometimes parents ask about that stuff, so I will probably post that on my YouTube as well, so people will know, or at the very least I'll have it on my website and share the link so you guys can assess on what you might want to purchase. Anyway, God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.